mind.
Alrighty. Today's conversation is one I am genuinely excited about because we're diving into a topic that affects every organization, every leader, and every employee. I'm honored to welcome Josh Block, CEO of Block Imaging and author of the powerful book, People Matter at Work. Welcome, Josh.
Great to be with you, Vincent.
It's an interesting fact. According to Harvard University, 65% of workers feel underappreciated and 30% feel invisible in the workplace. And people matter at work. You argue that people need to feel safe, seen, and successful. Looking back on your own career, was there a specific season when you felt unseen, isolated, or as though you mattered less than the work itself? How did that experience shape your decision to write this book?
Yeah, so for me, I really have always been a business owner and entrepreneur, and so I haven't had that experience as much as the average person. I always loved work. I grew up in a home where my dad talked about work as a positive thing. And so it was less about my own experience in having a negative work experience and more about my belief that work could be an incredible opportunity, a privilege, a positive thing, colliding in my 20s with what everybody else was experiencing and the way they talked about work and talked about their bosses and this miserable experience. And so I think it was more my positive view colliding with the world's negative view that really led me to ask the question, what if we could create a place where people love to work?
You know what? It's amazing that even after authors, have wrote like the five dysfunctions of a team, that there still is this gap where employees feel the majority of people you talk to, they do not feel valued at work. They don't feel centralized and balanced. What do you feel is the leading cause of leaders missing that employees walk away feeling defeated and they're working 8 to 5 and not feeling like they are being recognized?
Yeah, I think on one side of the spectrum, you have selfishness that comes into play as we're all wired to look through our own eyeballs and see the world through our own desires and needs and hopes and challenges and those sorts of things. So you kind of have like the selfishness of humanity that we're challenged to battle against. And then the other side of the spectrum is this elevation of publicly traded companies that in the last 70 years, we've shifted from an agrarian culture and society to a corporate culture and ultimately a publicly owned enterprise, which has really led to the distance between shareholders and between the team members that work at the company is huge. Is that many people own, whether they're a teacher or anyone, owns stock through a 401k plan, and they have no idea what's happening in the company. In fact, if they saw how the boss was treating their people, they would be embarrassed to own it. But that's just part of the deal today, that many of us own companies and we have no idea what the product is being delivered or the service. We have no idea what the employees are experiencing on the ground. And so again, I just think that it's much easier to be disconnected from people that we're far away from. And so the distance between the owners of a company and employees has never been wider than it is today.
That's very interesting. So, what advice would you give to a leader, whether a small, medium, or large company who wants to improve that but doesn't know where to begin? Where would be the first starting point?
Yeah, I go back to identity is who do I want to be as a leader? And then identity kind of leads to legacy is there's exercises like my leadership obituary or who do I want to be known for? What do I want my leadership eulogy to sound like? And that to be more tangible, what do I want the people I lead to say about me in 5 years? Is even beginning through the lens of asking, what do I want their experience to be? Because if we're not careful, we can actually become the boss or the leader that we once resented. That there's all sorts of things that if I was a leader, I would never do that. I would never say that. I'd never make decisions in that way. And yet, once we feel the weight and responsibility and have all the information that leaders have, all of a sudden we see people differently. And before you know it, we see them as entitled. We begin to resent them. And so, again, asking ourselves, like, what do we want to be said of us in 5 years is a great starting point.
That's a very good point. Can a company be high performing and deeply human, or do leaders still see that as a trade off?
Yeah, a lot of people do see it as a trade-off. And I think that the Contrarian's Guide to Leadership talks about how it's very hard to be a leader and see things in black and white, that there's so many paradoxes, there's so many tensions where people and performance, data and gut, care and challenges. How do we hold two things simultaneously? And so for me, I think even when we go back to that publicly traded company side of things, is oftentimes they're focused on short run earnings, quarterly earnings. What are the things that you would do as a parent if you were only thinking one quarter at a time versus thinking of 20 years or 50 years or 100 years? And so I think that's one of the differences oftentimes in family businesses and in public enterprises is the longevity that we're thinking about, the lens we're looking through. And so, yeah, I think of like, if you're thinking short run, you think get the most out of people as quickly as we can. If you're thinking long run, my thought has been develop people, invest in them, invite them into being more than they ever dreamed of, and then the performance will follow.
I- The five dysfunctions of a team mentions that the bottom layer of the pyramid is trust, and that kind of amplifies your point that you're making right now is you're sowing in trust is not something that's easily gained. And so you're giving an analogy of if you want to get something quickly, you're probably going to lose a lot of trust, but you might get the financial benefit. But if you're looking for something long term that's going to cultivate the culture of a team, it's going to take a long time, or not necessarily a long time, but it's going to take you planting seeds and developing and watering those, is what you're saying.
Absolutely. Has anyone ever gone on one date and got married the next day? No, trust takes time, right? And the
It's a
same,
good
even I
point.
think of nutrition is what do you eat when you're looking for a 10-minute spark versus what do you eat when you're looking for a lifetime of health and well-being? It's just we're oftentimes faced with long lens or short lens thinking.
If listeners remember just one idea from the book, People Matter at Work, what do you hope it is?
Yeah, that people are a gift, that work is a privilege, and that leadership is the embodiment of those two realities. That once we shift from people are a gift to people are a pain or people are lazy or people are whatever, we start to it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so for me, getting up every day, even having the really hard conversations, even in letting someone go, they're still a gift. They're a gift to their family. They're a gift to their community. They're a gift maybe even to the next organization they work for. But I'd love for people to wake up and think about people are a gift and work is a privilege.
I- In difficult times, layoffs, burnout, uncertainty, what does people first leadership look like?
Yeah. Layoffs. So the conversation around AI and obsolescence and even let's talk about the layoffs. It is necessary at times for companies to make really hard decisions, whether it be about an individual or when performance isn't where it needs to be, that you can only lose money for so long before you have a problem, right? Or you're either growing or you're shrinking in many ways. And the question that I would ask is, how would you want to be treated if you were going to be laid off? What would you want the severance to look like? What would you want the communication to look like? And oftentimes, like, well, you're an at-will team member. I just have a friend who is with an organization for like 2 decades. Boss gets on the phone 3 minutes and says, "We're an at-will employer. You know, your time here has come to an end." And it's like you spent all this time giving all these awards and certificates and watches and 10-year recognitions, and then you spend 3 minutes transitioning someone. So I think for me, that whole idea is you are going to have to make tough calls. You are going to have to make hard conversations. But how do you do them in such a way that honors the person and treats them in the way that you'd like to be treated if you were on the other side of the phone call?
It's amazing. Your sense of integrity, your sense of identity of who you are as a person is the secret sauce to me of why you have led block imaging to be such a successful endeavor. What do companies often misunderstand about employees' motivation and engagement? For an example, how do you stay plugged in with people that are on the front lines and in the trenches versus where you are at such a bird's eye view looking at everything? How do you articulate to make sure that a recognition of the hard work of the people in the trenches is being seen, and at the same time maneuvering and tweaking the levers at such a high level?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I have the touch side of things. So every day, and depending on whether you're virtual or whether you're in office, I walk in the parking lot, right? So I get out of my car, and inevitably, I'm gonna see several people on the way into the office. I can go in different entrances to our headquarters and bump into people and just have a meaningful couple of minutes. Maybe it's a fist bump, maybe it's a smile, maybe it's a how was your weekend. So you have kind of those touch points with the people who are being led by someone else. And then the other side is leadership development. How are we inviting people into an understanding, which partly the book was written for the world, is to invite them in and to encourage, equip, and empower them as leaders, but also to codify for block imaging. Hey, this is how we became who we've become. And it's important that we continue living this out if we want to be a company that we want our kids to work for someday.
Looking at through that lens is, what do you think the best workplace of the future will do differently? I think you've set a great example of what to do differently is to cultivate a company that recognizes and sees employees as actual people and family so that you build something that's lasting, not something that you're trying to squeeze out the juice of a lemon just that
Yeah.
day. And what would you say is the key component that led you to have the mindset in belief of success at this particular moment right now in your career?
Yeah, I think about my parents. My dad, hard worker, entrepreneur, business mind, sales persona. And then my mom has this deep care for people that my mom has 20 plus grandkids, and there's not a day that goes by that one of those grandchildren aren't at her house and she's loving and caring for and investing in them. And so I'd like to think that this merging of entrepreneurship, organizational leadership, and then deep care for people is part of what was in my blood or in my bones that kind of led me to pursue, hey, how can we care for people in a business context? How can we perform really well and simultaneously walk out a deep care for people?
That's really powerful. For companies, let's say with limited budgets, what are some low cost ways to improve the employee experience? So if you're a newer business that's starting out and you